All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're about to look at a tiny, maybe 30-second biblical passage that secretly hides a massive, literally universe-altering historical mystery. It's kind of like finding a hidden line of code that entirely rewrites the operating system of an ancient text. We're talking about a passage sitting in the 6th chapter of Genesis. It's so compressed, so deliberately understated, that honestly most readers just step right over it. But if you actually stop and examine the original language, wow. It unlocks this dark pattern woven through the entire Old Testament, and it goes straight into the modern era.
So here's the central mystery of our investigation today. What if a single misunderstood Hebrew word completely transforms our understanding of ancient history and spiritual warfare? As our deep dive analysis reveals, modern English translations have quietly smoothed over some incredibly ancient, loaded language. They've basically flattened a terrifying cosmic warning into a mere historical curiosity.
Take a look at the text in question. This is Genesis 6:4. It introduces the terrifying Nephilim, the offspring of an event the Bible treats as absolutely catastrophic, and assigns them this really perplexing title: Heroes of Old, Men of Renown. Now, in a text as architecturally precise as Genesis, you gotta know this isn't just a casual description. It is a very specific, highly theological designation.
Okay, Section 1. Decoding the suspects, the sons of God. To understand who exactly caused this catastrophic collision in the pre-flood world, we have to look at the three prevailing scholarly theories regarding the identity of these sons of God. Theory number 1 suggests they were simply the righteous human line of Seth intermarrying with the ungodly line of Cain, right? Theory 2 proposes they were powerful human kings or tyrants who basically styled themselves as divine rulers. And then there's Theory 3, which posits that these were actual divine heavenly beings who crossed a forbidden boundary into the earthly realm.
Now here's the thing. Ancient texts and the general historical consensus heavily favor that third, supernatural theory. This interpretation actually has the deepest roots in ancient Jewish scholarship. It's directly supported by ancient texts like 1st Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and even the Greek Septuagint translation, which straightforwardly translates the phrase as angels. The analysis essentially argues that the pre-flood world experienced a genuine incursion where the sacred boundaries between the heavenly and earthly realms were deliberately violated.
Moving right along to Section 2, Decoding the Clue and the True Meaning of Gibor.
The most critical clue of our investigation lies in the original Hebrew word, buried deep beneath our English text. Modern English calls these beings men of renown, and when we hear that, it implies mere fame, visibility, or celebrity status. Think of them kind of like ancient, incredibly toxic social media influencers. But the ancient Hebrew word used here is gibor, and gibor implies a terrifying power that exceeds ordinary human boundaries. It denotes a deliberate, counterfeit divine dominion. Completely different vibe, isn't it?
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that gibor, or the plural, giborim, is not a compliment. Not at all. It is a deliberate theological classification. It marks beings whose violent power and dominion operated entirely outside of God's created, natural order. The author of Genesis wasn't just telling a story. They were diagnosing a condition, classifying these beings within a spiritual taxonomy of transgressive power.
All right, Section 3, the modus operandi, a counterfeit sacred order.
So how did these beings actually operate? Well, they didn't just conquer by brute force. Instead, they seduced humanity by building an alternative, counterfeit cosmology. Let's look at this comparison. Where the true divine order organizes around righteousness and covenant, the counterfeit organizes around transgressive strength and renown. While the divine order brings true freedom in life, the Giborim created a civilization of complete dependency, which ultimately required a total divine reset, meaning the flood.
And honestly, this is perhaps the most chilling historical detail of the whole explainer. The pre-flood world didn't actually experience this as a threat. No, the daughters of men welcomed this blurring of sacred boundaries. They saw it as progress, as empowerment, and an elevation of human potential. It was this gradual seduction, dressed up in the language of strength, beauty, and renown.
Let's hit Section 4, Tracking the Threat and Tracing the Ancient Pattern.
Genesis notes something really interesting. It says the Nephilim were on the earth and also afterward. The pattern of the Giborim, this whole architecture of counterfeit power, actually reconstitutes itself chronologically throughout history. It survives the floodwaters. We see it emerge in the giants of Canaan and the enemies during King David's reign, and even later in the territorial heavenly princes described during Daniel's exile. It's a continuous thread. For example, remember when the Israelites reached the promised land of Canaan? The spies returned with this exact report from Numbers 13. We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Notice they specifically used the pre-flood terminology. This wasn't just an exaggeration by frightened men, it was a clear theological signal that the Gibor pattern had deliberately repositioned itself as gatekeepers, specifically to block God's covenant people.
And this dark pattern continues deep into the era of King David. Historically, our sources show that David's military campaigns are viewed not just as standard ancient warfare, but as a highly theological cosmic housecleaning. David and his own mighty men were tasked with systematically dismantling the remaining Gibborim legacy. We're talking about fighting giants with specific physical anomalies, like 6 fingers and 6 toes. They were actively clearing out this ancient counterfeit power structure from the Promised Land.
Which brings us to Section 5, the warning for today, the modern prophetic application.
So why does all this ancient history matter to us right now? Well, because we see it powerfully echoing in the Apostle Paul's famous warning in Ephesians 6. He writes, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities in the heavenly realms." Now, Paul is not speaking in abstract metaphors here. As the analysis reveals, he is directly referencing that ancient Gibor classification system.
When Paul uses the Greek terms archaeus for rulers and exousias for authorities, these map perfectly back to the Genesis 6 taxonomy. It's no coincidence. Paul is purposefully naming the exact same territorial transgressive powers from the Old Testament. The strategy of the Gibborim hasn't been archived in some museum. It's active, it's adaptive, and it's operating today with the very same signature of counterfeit power.
Because this threat is so active, the famous armor of God is absolutely not a passive spiritual metaphor. It's literally prescribed tactical survival gear. Where the Gibbor offered counterfeit power, this armor offers genuine righteousness and truth. Fastening the belt of truth, putting on the breastplate of righteousness, it's a deliberate, total act of preparation. It's designed to help you resist the gravitational pull of modern cultural seductions that are actively trying to blur sacred boundaries right now.
But here's the incredible hope in all of this. Against the endless stream of counterfeit powers, transgressive authorities, and cultural seductions throughout human history, there is only one true mighty God. In Hebrew, that phrase is El Gibor. The text identifies this ultimate boundary-establishing power as Jesus Christ. He represents the only source of power that does not displace the sacred, simply because he is the sacred. The ancient world was seduced by the men of renown, literally pulling an entire civilization away from its created center. And you know what? The world will always offer you a counterfeit Gibor to orient yourself around, a source of power or celebrity dressed up as progress. So ask yourself today, what counterfeit renown are you orienting your life around? Are you standing firm? Or are you being swept away by the flood of modern seduction? Keep questioning the surface of the text you read, and we'll see you next time.